Hey, what's up? On Wednesday, December the 4th, 2024, I'm looking at Shoeless Joe Jackson's career. I just covered all his box scores from 1908 through the 1920 season, where that was his last. At 32 years old, he was suspended and kicked out of baseball for gambling in the 1919 World Series. The gambling accusations, the fixing of the World Series. He admitted he took $5,000. In fact, you see this book right here? Say It Ain't So, Joe. I read it. It's a good read. He admitted in this book that he took $5,000. As a result, he was one of the 8 players indicted. He was found innocent, not guilty, by a jury of his peers. But the commissioner, after the 1920 season, told the 8 indicted baseball players from the Chicago White Sox who played in the 1919 World Series, he told them, "You're out. You're suspended. You're out of baseball forever." Joe Jackson did not play in the leagues ever again. This video I'm going to do right here is a recap of his career, and I want to ask the question, where does Shoeless Joe Jackson rank among the greatest hitters of all time? Well, his career, he played 1,332 games, got 4,981 at bats. Not enough for me. I like guys to get like about 10,000 at bats and have maybe 2,500 to 3,000 games. That way you can measure their career batting average by that. What have you done in 2,500 games? He only played 1,332. He got 873 runs scored. Not enough for me. 1,772 hits, a good pace. But at age 32, he got suspended and kicked out of baseball. We don't know. Was he on pace for 3,000 hits? I think so. 8 years? Let's say he got 8 years, and let's say he averaged about 180 hits a year. He's capable of 200 hits a year. So 8 times 180 would be 1,440 more hits. He had 1,772. 1772, 1440. That would have gave him 3,200 career hits if he had averaged 180 hits for 8 more years until the age of 40. He was 32 when he got kicked out. You know, his last season, he got 218 hits. He was on a roll. 307 doubles, 168 triples, only 54 home runs. Not a slugger. 792 RBI, not that many, right? He was not an RBI guy. He only had one season over 100 RBIs. That was his last, 1920, 121 RBIs. He had 202 career stolen bases. He had 519 walks. He only struck out 233 times and 4,981 at bats. That's pretty good, don't you think? That's like a strikeout every, let's say, 50 at bats, 60 at bats. Very good ratio. 356 career batting average. That's why I covered him. I was curious, how did he do that? How did he have a career average 356? Well, he had a 408 season, we know that. He had a 387. He had a 395. He had a 373. And he also had a 354 and a 351. So for 13 years, there are some other years where he was a little down. He was down. He had a 308. He had a 301. He had a 382 also. Did you know that Joe Jackson had 4 seasons over 380? Pretty good. He almost had a second 400 batting season. He batted 408 in 1911. He came back the next year and batted 395. And both of those years, he's playing every game. So that's a measure. If you're playing every game and you bat 408, that is significant. So 2 years in a row, actually there was a 3-year period. 1911, 408, 233 hits. 1912, 395. He had 226 hits. And then in 1913, he bats 373 and had 197 hits. So in a 3-year period, he had 650 hits. How about that? Very good. His career on base percentage, 423. Career slugging, 517. Not bad, 500. And then he had about 2577 total bases. So this video recapping Joe Jackson's career. The reason why I covered him, 356. That's impressive. Now, let's answer the question. Where does Joe Jackson rank among the greatest hitters of all time? To me, he didn't play long enough to warrant consideration among the top 10 all time. Not long enough. 1,332 games, 1,772 hits. What would he have done if he had played another 8 years? Could he have maintained 356? Now, my ranking of the greatest hitters of all time proved it by playing enough games and enough at-bats. Example. Number 1 on my list, greatest hitter of all time, no doubt, no question, Ty Cobb. Why? 366 career. And it's no fluke. Why? Because if you pull up his stats, he has 3,034 games and 11,440 at-bats. And he maintained 366. Incredible. So he's number 1. You got to put him there. Who do you put number 2? Greatest hitter of all time. Well, according to Baseball Reference, if you look at highest batting averages of all time, they have some of the Negro League players included. I think that's a mistake on their part. Why? Those guys didn't play long enough. Not enough games. Not enough at-bats. I'll give you an example. Oscar Charlton they say his career batting average was 365. Okay, good. But if you look closer, how many games and how many at-bats? 917 games and only 3,312 at-bats. See, you can't measure. It's good, 365 for those games, but it's not enough for me. So he's not number 2. Who would I put number 2 greatest hitter of all time? Well, on the Baseball Reference, if you go look, it says Roger Hornsby had a 358 career batting average. So here's the test for me. How many games and how many at-bats? He had 2,259 games, and he had 8,173 at-bats. That's a good measure, wouldn't you say? I'd like to see more games, maybe 2,500 games, and maybe 10,000 at-bats. But he was prolific. He had 3 400 batting seasons. 1922, he batted 401. Then he batted in 1924, 424. Then he batted 1925, 403. 3 seasons, 400. Did you know that in the 1921 season, he was batting 400 on the last day of the season, and it was a full season. It was 154 games. I looked at the box score his last game that year. He went 0 for 4. And his batting average ended up 397. He was the closest to 400 batting seasons. Rogers Hornsby. Because of those facts, also he had a 384 and a 387 and a 380. So he ends up 358 career batting average. 358. I'm putting Roger Hornsby number 2 greatest hitter of all time because of that. Almost 400 batting seasons. Who do I put number 3? Greatest hitter of all time. Not player. There's a difference between player and hitter. Player, you can say greatest player of all time is Babe Ruth. Why? Because of the all-around accomplishments across the board, right? Not only the at-bats, but doubles, triples, homers, RBIs, runs scored, slugging, on base, total bases, right? Also, he had stolen bases, too. So across the board, you got to put Babe Ruth greatest player of all time. I'm focusing on greatest hitter of all time. Cobb 1, Hornsby 2. Who's number 3 in my book? If you go down the list, you got Joe Jackson's 356. He's not ranked number 3 for me because he doesn't have enough games and enough at-bats. He has 356, which is good, but not enough measurement of a career because he got kicked out. Only 13-year career. Excuse me. So he's not number 3 in my book. Who's number 3? Got Lefty O'Doul, 349. Not enough years. 11 years. You got Ed Delante, 16 years. He's at 346. So if you look closely at Ed Delante's career, 1,837 games, not enough for me. But what was interesting is, in those 1,800 games, he had 2,597 hits, almost 2,600. So to me, that opened my eyes. I say, wait a minute. What is the ratio of hits per game played for Ed Delante? If you do the math, 1,837 games, and you get 2,597 hits, that's a ratio of 1.41 hits per game. I looked it up. What other players had a higher ratio of hits per game played? I couldn't find any. Ed Delante is number 1, 1.41 hits per game. So he has 346 career batting average. And you know what opened my eyes? He had 3 400 batting seasons, just like Rogers Hornsby. Cobb had 3, Hornsby 3, and now Delante had 3. He batted 405 in 1894. Then he batted 404 in 1895, back-to-back 400. Then he goes 397. That's a 3-year period. And then a couple years later, he bats 410. So he gets 3 400s batting season, and he comes close with a 397, just like Hornsby did. He could have had 400 batting seasons. He struck out about 439 times. You know, looking at this guy, what convinced me was the 2,597 hits. That's good. He was on a pace for 3,000 hits. You know, his career ended at age 35 because remember Niagara Falls? He walks on the bridge at night, either jumped off himself, either got pushed off himself, or just accidentally fell off himself. We don't know. but he dies at age 35. He was on pace for 3,000 hits. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to rank Ed Dellante number 3 greatest hitter of all time because of the 2,597 hits in such a short period of time. He was banging out hits, and the 400 batting seasons and the 346 career batting average. He's number 3. Who's number 4? In my book, well, if you look at Baseball Reference, you got a guy named Tris Speaker at 345. And he meets the my test because he had 2,789 games. And he gets 3,514 hits. Bats 345. He had some good years. Never batted 400. But he did have a 383. He had a 386. He had a 388, he had a 380, and a 389. So he's got like 5 seasons over 380. Tris Speaker's number 4 greatest hitter of all time because of those stats. And who would I put number 5? Well, you got to look at Ted Williams' 344 career batting average. You got Billy Hamilton also at 344, but he's only got 14 years. Ted Williams, 19 seasons, and 4 of them in the military. He could have had 23 seasons in the league, but 4 of them he serves in the military. But he produced the numbers. Look at this. He does get 2,200 games just like Hornsby, and he does get 2,654 hits. And he's got the slugging. 521 homers. You got to put Ted Williams number 5. Greatest hitter of all time. He had 1 400 batting season. See, I can't put him ahead of Dellante and Williams. Because those guys, I can't put Williams ahead of Dellante and Hornsby because Williams only had the 1 400 batting season, where these other guys had 3, and they were close to 4. Same with Cobb; he had 4. Is that fair? I think so. You got to look at ratio of hits per game. Dellante has a 1.41 hits per game played. Hornsby he was about 1.38. When I looked it up, Williams is like 1.19. He's lower his hits per game played because he's more slugging. Also, you know what happened with him? He had too many walks, 2,000 walks. But I'm going to put Williams number 5. And then I look at, you got a guy like Lou Gehrig and George Sisler. They're in there in the top 10. Babe Ruth's in there. Harry Heilmann, Billy Hamilton, Willie Keeler. These guys. You can rank those guys 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Also, another guy you can't forget, Tony Gwynn. 19 seasons out of 20, over 300. He never batted 400. He had a 394. He had a good 372. He had some 200 hit seasons. You gotta consider Tony Gwynn one of the greatest hitters of all time. 338. Also, another guy you gotta look at is Stan Musial's 331 career. He had 3,600 hits. He was the measurement of he had close to 3,000 games. So he's up there. But the top 5, you got to go with Cobb, Hornsby, Dellante, Speaker, and then Williams. Incredible hitters. Now, as far as Joe Jackson, where you rank him, put him down in the top 25 or 30. See, not enough games. That's the drawback. He's got the 356, but would he have maintained that? Maybe he would have been about 350 if he slacked off toward the end of his career, or if he got better, maybe he got up to 358, 360. We don't know. But you can't put him the top 5, Joe Jackson. Put him top 20, top 25. There are other guys who played longer. Sorry. Gehrig, Sisler, Gwynn, Keeler, Hamilton. Don't forget Jesse Burkett. He had 2 400 batting seasons. Nap Lajoie is in there. Al Simmons, Cap Hansen. See, all these guys played longer than Joe Jackson. Okay, I have just recapped Joe Jackson's career. What do you think? I was curious about the guy, so I wanted to cover him. All right, that does it. That means I'm done. All right, listen, here's what I've done. I've looked at every box score of all these players. Babe Ruth, Ty Cobb, Lou Gehrig, Stan Musial, Tris Speaker, Rogers Hornsby, Ted Williams, Tony Gwynn, Jesse Burkett, George Sisler. And now I just finished Joe Jackson. Who should I go to next? I'm looking at the list. I'm not going to do Aaron and Mays yet because they were only 305 and 302 respectively in their career batting averages. I'm focusing on hitting. So I want to look to see how these other guys were able to get such a high batting average and such an enormous amount of career hits. I want to look at those guys and see how they did it. So who should I look at? There's a guy that kind of is old school. And you know what? I'm going to go to him next because he had a really good career. You know who I'm going to cover? Willie Keeler. Have you heard of him? He's in the Baseball Hall of Fame. I'm looking at his stats. 341 career. 2,932 hits. So he falls short of 3,000 hits. But he played 2,123 games. What a good ratio of hits per game played. I'm going to look at every season for this guy, and we're going to continue our series on videos on my YouTube channel, okay? Thanks for the subscribers, 71 of them and counting. Maybe I can get up to 100. We'll see. You know, there are other guys, when they have their YouTube channels, they have millions of subscribers. How do they do that? And they just talk about what? Life? Whatever they're talking about, yet they get millions of subscribers. I've got 71. I'm just talking baseball. I'm just a guy here in Vista, California. Just looking at the game of baseball, curious how these guys were able to have successful careers. That's what I'm doing. All right. Willie Keeler is next. Talk to you later. Respectfully, I'm out.